Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to 2020. I can't believe it's already 2020, that's insane. 2019 was a massive year for me and I feel like I learned so many valuable lessons along the way. Now shooting corporate videos aren't sexy and not talked about a lot here on YouTube, where it feels like a majority of top-end filmmakers are always doing music videos or travel vlogs on a daily basis. But beyond just paying the bills, I've also really enjoyed doing corporate work, just because it has provided a lot of learning opportunities, and I've found that each job does present its own unique set of challenges which you need to work around. What I wanted to do in this video is count down the top 6 pieces of equipment that I've been using over last year, and some of them I already had, others I kind of needed to purchase along the way, which have really helped me out in my corporate videography. So if you're looking to shoot some corporate events in 2020, stay tuned because I'm about to count them down. Number 1 is an on-camera monitor. Now, Small HD is a really popular brand. I see them a lot here in Australia, especially with DPs and corporate videographers, but I've ended up settling for the Animus Ninja 5, and there's a reason for that. Basically, the monitor also allows a recording function as well to SSDs, and although I don't find it that useful for this particular camera I'm shooting with at the moment, which is a Canon C200, I've actually had to use mirrorless cameras before on previous jobs, and mirrorless cameras don't have the same amount of features that the C200 has. Now I kind of feel we've gone past the days where you needed an external recorder to get better quality images off your camera. A lot of mirrorless cameras these days shoot really robust images straight out to the SD card and you don't need to worry about an external recorder. But a lot of them also have pretty terrible battery life and they're missing a lot of features. So for example, when shooting with my Fujifilm X-T3 at a corporate event, which I've actually had to use before as a secondary camera, I'm shooting an F-log. I don't have any way to monitor that from the camera without plugging in an external monitor. So what that means is I'm looking at a very flat image on my X-T3 screen and I'm just hoping that it's properly exposed because again, don't have waveforms, don't have a way to properly monitor it. I'm just really relying off my past experience shooting with F-log. And that's not very professional and it's something that I really can't, be very consistent with. So having an external monitor that allows me to apply a LUT to the final image, to see what it's going to look like, to have the waveforms, to have the false colors is really important. But beyond that, as I was talking about, battery life is pretty terrible. If I'm recording on my Fujifilm X-T3, maybe got half an hour, 40 minutes max when I'm recording. So a really good thing with the external monitor is I can basically take that signal, just use the monitor to record instead to a more robust ProRes codec anyway, and then it also gives me more battery life. So I'm looking at just over an hour with the Animus recorder attached, which is a really decent improvement in battery life because suddenly the camera isn't having to process that image as it's recording. And personally, I found the 5-inch form factor to be really helpful as well. I used to have a 7-inch Animus Ninja Assassin back in the day, and that was just a massive monitor. It weighed a ton. Once you put batteries on it, it was just like not a run and gun type of monitor, but it did give you a great image. However, at the same time, you really paid the price in terms of portability, and I feel like it wasn't great for run and gun type setups, especially for corporate events. Now, the next item on my list is a 70 to 200mm lens. Now, back in the day, I used to have a Sigma version for my old Canon 60D, and to be honest, it wasn't a great lens. I know Sigma's come a very far way from back in the old days, but I never went with the Canon one because for me, it just felt like it was gonna be a little bit too expensive. And so what I ended up doing was I sold that 70 to 200. I wasn't getting a lot of use out of it. And then as soon as I got back into corporate events, I realized how important it was. Basically, if you're going to a corporate event, there's 2 things that are happening. People are eating, and then there's presentations going on. There's always a presentation. That's why there's a corporate event in the first place, usually speaking. Basically, a 70 to 200mm lens is a necessity because you're going to be behind the crowd. Sometimes it could be 50 meters plus away from the main stage easily. So a 70 to 200mm lens is super important. I don't use this lens a lot otherwise, but I find it's so useful for corporate videography that it's basically already paid for itself with the amount of times I've used it. And it's especially great when you've got things like those eating breaks in corporate events because you want to be further away. There's, you've got people who are having nice chats with others, who are just smiling and laughing and being happy, which is what you want for all these corporate videos. And you don't want to be up close right next to the person with your 35mm lens and they're just like looking at the camera and they get a bit camera shy, they feel a bit uncomfortable. Whereas with the 70 to 200, you're kind of a bit stealth, you're in the background. It sounds a bit creepy, but you need it for corporate events. And I feel like, yeah, bird watching as well it's really good. Not that I do a lot of bird watching myself, but I was also going to say before I move on to the next one, having a zoom lens rather than a fixed focal length is really important too. So I do own a 100mm macro lens, and yeah, sometimes 100mm might be the right kind of focal length for a particular shot of a presentation, but a lot of the times it isn't. A lot of the times you have no room for movement or very limited room for movement. So if you've got a fixed 200mm lens, you're really limiting yourself. And I feel like a fixed 200mm lens would probably cost more than a 70-200 anyway. So go for the 70-200. Well recommended. Now, next on my list, number 3 is a tripod. Now, I can already hear you, and I hate this guy, I'm already bored. Tripods, oh my God, everyone has a tripod, who cares? But you need a good tripod for corporate videography. I just mentioned the 70-200mm lens. For the Canon EF mount, that is a pretty hefty lens. It weighs a lot, and it adds a lot more bulk to your camera. So originally I was shooting with a much smaller Manfrotto tripod, and I felt like I was within the weight limits of my Canon C200, which is a fairly light camera to begin with. But once you start adding the monitor, you start adding the 70-200mm lens, it starts to get really hefty. And beyond that, you're shooting at 200mm sometimes from 50 meters away, and you're trying to get a medium shot of someone who's on a podium, and then they start to go out and they go for a bit of a walk on the stage. And really, you need a good solid tripod to make sure you're not getting a lot of shake in your images. Away from just having IBIS and having, image stabilization on your lens or potentially in your camera, just having a good stable tripod, a good surface to work from. A good tripod basically give you a lot more adjustments for pan and for tilt. And so therefore you'll definitely be able to get some really good shots, some really good stable shots, which is really important. So recently I invested in the Manfrotto 535 legs, which are carbon fiber and they're nice and light, and the N8 head, which can support payloads up to 8 kilograms. And to be honest, the C200 with the 70-200mm lens, the large MPF battery on the back of the Animus Ninja 5, it's weighing over 6 kilos. So I would definitely recommend a good tripod head with good tripod legs. It may cost a little bit, and I decided not to go for the Miller tripod. Miller's also a very popular brand, I found, especially in the UK and in Australia. But honestly, it wasn't worth the $600 extra price. And I trust Manfrotto. They've got really good quality products, and they are a bit less than Miller and the competition. So I've been very happy with it so far, and I'm sure it's gonna serve me well in 2020. Number 4 is a camera cart. Now, when you think camera cart, and when I used to think camera cart, I always thought about those fancy, they almost look like, just regular storage carts, but they cost 10 times the amount. But those particular carts are really useful in studio shoots and on location, because you're never gonna have the first AD, the camera assistant, just sitting on the ground putting together the camera. They're gonna want a good surface to work from, and they can't always rely on the location to have that. Thankfully, in my experience, a lot of corporate gigs I've shot at, a lot of the venues, I have been able to just sort of work right out of my bag or find a tabletop surface that I can work off of. But the biggest thing actually comes down to transporting your gear. So if you're moving your gear from your car to the actual location, it got to the point where I had so many bags and tripods, and it was just like I was carrying this whole bunch of stuff, like 4 or 5 really hefty bags, into the Melbourne Exhibition Convention Centre, which is, I guess for context, is kind of like walking a quarter of a regular sized stadium. And I'm just waddling through up to this room for a corporate gig, and I rock up, and I just, even though it was fine, the client really liked it and they enjoyed the job and everything was fine, it just definitely feels a little bit unprofessional in the sense that I'm rocking up with all this gear and it's so heavy, and it's just, I look uncomfortable. So therefore it's just not the best way to enter and say hi to a client to begin with. Sorry, I've just got all these bags, and just get out of my way. Oh, I'm just like, my shoulder's killing me already, my back hurts. Not great. So what I ended up doing is I invested in a crane cart, Crane AMG 500, I think was the brand name. It's basically a small cart that folds up. It can go in the front passenger seat of your car. It can take a whole bunch, like 100 kilograms or more of weight. I think it's like 500 kilograms, which is why it's the AMG 500. I don't need 500 kilograms of weight on that cart. I just need, a good little solid surface to put my camera bag and my tripod and everything else. And the next job I used it on was an absolute breeze. I loved it. I could just take all the stuff out of my car, put it on the camera cart, wheel it over, and already I just looked so much more relaxed and felt so much more relaxed before the actual corporate gig got started. So I would definitely recommend. It's a few $100s. Yes, it's not cheap for a camera cart, but at the same time, if you're looking to save your back and also make a good impression for clients, I would definitely recommend getting a good camera cart. Number 5 is batteries. Now, batteries, again, sound pretty boring, but at the same time, I used to have enough batteries just to get me through a full day shoot. But then I realized something. I actually had a back-to-back shoot one day, which was 2 10-hour days, and they were pretty long. I was going through MPF batteries and they were taking a long time to charge. Now, if you don't use Sony MPF batteries that have fast charging capability, MPF batteries, once they die, they do last a little while, but once they die, they take hours upon hours to charge. Usually, I think they can take up to 20 hours to charge, like fully charged sometimes, depending on the size of these MPF batteries. And I'm shooting with the 970s, the big chunky ones. So basically, I am shooting this gig. I am charging my batteries, obviously, as they start to run out. I go home, I keep charging them. The next day I wake up, they're still charging. I'm going back to the gig again that day. And I'm just hoping that in the overlap, while these batteries, I'm waiting for them to charge, my other ones aren't gonna die, and I'm not gonna be left without a monitor, I'm not gonna be left without a light. It was really stressful. So a big lesson I learned in 2019 was that I not only need enough batteries for one day, but I need to make sure I can charge those batteries and get them back for the second day as well. And to be honest, if you start shooting a lot of corporate gigs, you're gonna be having back-to-back days of shooting, so you really want a solution that can charge pretty quickly. So what I've decided to do in 2020 is get some V-mount batteries to power the C200 and also the Animus Ninja 5 at the same time. I feel like V-mount batteries are pretty great because they're universal, they work across different accessories, and they also can hold a lot more capacity than obviously the smaller Canon batteries and Sony MPF batteries. So definitely they're gonna be a very big addition to my kit. They're not cheap, unfortunately, but I would still definitely recommend them if you're gonna be doing this a lot, because again, it just helps you to get through a full day. If you get a good charger, they can charge fairly quickly as well, and then you're back again the next day and everything's fine. And lastly, number 6 is a wireless Lav system. Now, when I first started shooting corporate gigs, thankfully I was working a lot with a sound person, which was great. And then I got pushed out to a few solo gigs where I didn't have a sound person, and when it came to doing some interviews, I really only had my Rode lavalier and a Zoom H1. So that was a dual system kind of setup where I would give the particular talent, the lavalier, and they'd have to put the recorder in their shirt, usually their suit pocket or wherever they could put it. And what ended up happening, of course, is it's just a little bit stressful because you're hoping that the Zoom H1 doesn't run out of batteries. You're hoping that everything goes well. It's just another point of failure. The production company then has to sync it up later on with the footage. So again, you're sort of making them do more work as well. It just made more sense to get a wireless Lav kit, especially now that they're getting so cheap as well. I went with the Rode Link Filmmaker kit, and I feel like that's been a great addition. I've really enjoyed using it. It's been fairly reliable. I haven't had any dropouts yet, knock on wood. And for what you're getting, the value for money is great as well. I wanted to go for the Sennheiser AVX wireless kit. It sounded better. The lavalier that comes with it sounds way better, but it just wasn't worth the extra cost. I looked into it, I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? I can get 2.5 Rode Link systems for the price of one AVX system. This just feels like such a luxury purchase when I'm just getting so many more diminishing returns buying a much more expensive lavalier. So it helps me out so much on gigs now because I can actually monitor the audio directly through the camera, make sure I'm actually getting the proper sound while I'm recording an interview with the talent. And then obviously it's much easier for the production companies that I work with to just go ahead and edit it later on without having to go, oh, yep, okay, cool, got the WAV file, gonna drag it into Premiere, gonna make sure it lines up. So basically, if you want to be more valuable to the companies that you're working for, just get a wireless Lav system because it's not that expensive comparatively to what it used to cost. It's so much easier to use as well. The Rode Link kit is super simple and it's really a good investment. And I think it's going to serve me very well in 2020. So there were a lot of things I didn't mention in this list, and there's probably a good reason for it. I feel like I want to make a video on some of the things you probably don't need when you're shooting corporate events. So if you want to see that, hit the like button, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Best of luck shooting out there in 2020, and I'll see you all again very soon.